Speaker, I am so proud of how Canadians have come together with incredible determination and solidarity, and it's our role in this Parliament to help them what they need. Because whether it was a crisis in long-term care or the fact that we didn't have the PPE for our frontline workers, Canadians weren't prepared. Canada was not prepared, and we can never leave them in that position again. And so to the Minister of Middle-Class Prosperity, it became clear that within a week of COVID, millions of Canadians did not have enough savings to pay their rent. I want to ask this government what commitment they're going to make to work with the New Democrats to ensure that Canadian workers and families are never, ever again left in such a precarious financial position.
The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I can tell you that since day one, we have been working hard to develop an economic response plan to help all Canadians, all workers, businesses, to be able to go through this pandemic. And we will continue to support all Canadians so they can put food on their table and they can pay their bills.
Mr. Angus.
I really appreciate that answer. I guess the question that I'm asking, though, is where do we go from here? Because, you know, it's not the billionaires who stepped up, but it was the personal support workers and the grocery store clerks and the cleaners working for $14 an hour that have put themselves on the line. And they know going back to that old normal. I'm asking what steps will we take? Is $2,000 a month the new baseline to ensure financial security for workers across this country, and will the federal government play a role in ensuring that that's the new baseline?
Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, our top priority since the beginning has always been the health and welfare of Canadians. As you probably have seen, we have developed an economic response that will help Canadians, workers, and businesses. The Canada Emergency Response Benefit helps Canadians across the country to be able to pay their bills during this very unprecedented time. And we will continue to find other programs to support Canadians through this very difficult time.
Angus.
Thank you very much. Well, there's one way we could help, because families in the rural north, they're doing their part to flatten the curve. They're at home with their children who are getting schooled online. They're working at home. And yet if you're living in a rural area, you're getting hosed and you're getting fleeced by companies like Bell. I have a family that have got a bill for $650 a month. I have another family that have to drive into town to the Tim Hortons so their kids can sit in the car and do their homework. I'm asking this government, everybody has to step up in the age of COVID, and that includes corporations. So what steps will this government take to make the telecom carriers like Bell play their part and stop fleecing rural northern families?
The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, first of all, as we have discussed already this afternoon, improved internet access for Canadians in remote northern rural communities is absolutely a priority. It's been a priority for our government from before this crisis, and the member opposite is entirely right that the crisis has underscored the importance of rural broadband access for children, for their parents. And when it comes to corporate responsibility in this crisis, I agree with member opposite. We all have to do our part, and I think we're seeing essential workers, many of them very poorly paid, doing heroic acts every day, and we expect corporate Canada to step up too.
Mr. Angus.
Thank you. I really appreciate that answer. I look forward to the next steps to make sure that corporate Canada, when it comes to rural telecom, helps out. First Nation communities are doing enormous amount of work to protect their people from COVID. But in the far north, where we have many communities with overcrowded homes and poor medical service, the only tool they have is the complete lockdown and shutdown of their communities. And they are keeping their communities safe, but the economic impact of that means devastation to the small air carriers and airports like in Moosonee that service community regions like Treaty 9. The beating of COVID cannot include the loss of air service across the north from bankruptcy. So I'm asking the minister, what steps will he take to work with and ensure that coming out of COVID, that our air transport into the northern Indigenous communities remains strong?
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Chair. Very important question. We know the essential service nature of air travel into remote and Indigenous communities, particularly 96 First Nations communities and 50 more Inuit communities. This is something that the government has moved quite swiftly to address by assuring financial stability, funding the territories with, in the case of the Yukon, $3.6 million in emergency funding for the airlines, $8.7 million for the Northwest Territories, and $5 million for Nunavut. This is something that we'll continue to do, and in respect of First Nations in fly-in communities, we're working actively to bridge that gap because we know the nature of that essential service. Thank you.
Ms. Gilland.